At my dad's birthday party, a moment etched in my memory. I could hardly believe the name tag that read, "The disappointment was meant for me." It struck a nerve, igniting a tempest of emotions swirling within me. My stepmom, Stephanie, found it laughable, her mirth only fueling the fire of my anger. With a heart pounding like a drum, I stood up, clinking my glass to demand the room's attention. The words spilled from my lips as if they had been waiting to escape for years, declaring that this would be the last time they'd ever see me. My father's expression shifted from joviality to shock, a silent testament to the rift that had grown between us over the years, as I strode out the door, leaving him in stunned silence. At 32, I had become a reflection of my father's disappointment. Not because of any failure in the conventional sense, but because I had chosen to forge my own path, one that diverged from the rigid expectations he had long imposed. James, my father, had always prioritized control, appearances, and family loyalty, but only as long as it suited his narrative. The divorce from my mother when I was just 10 years old marked the beginning of a transformation in our family dynamics. It was not a particularly tumultuous separation, yet he wasted no time in remarrying Stephanie, a woman who came with her own 2 children, Hunter and Olivia. This development signaled a seismic shift in my relationship with him, one that I tried to navigate with grace, desperate for his approval and happiness. Initially, the changes were subtle, like whispers in the wind. My dad missing my soccer games to cheer for Hunter, or forgetting to pick me up after school, while he was always punctual for Olivia's dance recitals. With each missed moment, the chasm between us deepened, growing wider until it became impossible to ignore. By the time I turned 14, I found myself in the role of a caretaker, babysitting my half-siblings and assisting with chores that they were never burdened with. My complaints about feeling sidelined were met with my father's weary sighs and Stephanie's dismissive remarks that branded me as selfish. The tipping point arrived when my dad drained the college savings account that my mother had diligently set aside for me. Despite her efforts to reclaim what was rightfully mine in court, the damage was irrevocable, and my anger festered like an untreated wound. I barely spoke to him during my final year of high school, and when I left for college, the visits home became mere obligations, excursions punctuated by the familiar tension that had come to define our relationship. I felt like a ghost in my own family, merely the difficult child who refused to conform to the idealized picture my father had painted, while Hunter and Olivia basked in the glow of his utmost affection. So when Stephanie organized a grand birthday celebration for my dad, my initial instinct was to stay away. However, my aunt's gentle persuasion coaxed me into attending, urging me to give a chance. Spoiler alert, it was a mistake. The moment I stepped through the door, a weight settled upon my chest, the familiar tension enveloping me like a heavy cloak. Instead of warm embraces, I was met with polite nods and forced smiles. My father, across the room, wore a facade of happiness, but that mask slipped when he caught sight of me. It was then that I spotted a small table adorned with name tags, each representing the guests. Most bore the typical names of friends and family, but mine stood out starkly. It read The Disappointment. A wave of confusion washed over me, initially convincing me it was a mistake or perhaps a cruel joke. But as I locked eyes with Stephanie, her smirk betrayed the truth. It was intentional. A surge of anger bubbled beneath my skin. Yet instead of reacting impulsively, I placed the name tag back on the table, aligning it with the others, as if to restore some semblance of order. My aunt approached, concern lining her face, but I reassured her that I was fine, even though I felt anything but. Exhaustion enveloped me, a feeling I struggled to articulate. This was not a new experience. It was a part of an agonizingly familiar pattern of subtle digs and reminders of my designated place within the family hierarchy. Somehow, I found the courage to stay, driven by a desire to assert myself, to stand up against the years of silent suffering. With a deep breath, I donned a genuine smile, picked up a glass of champagne, and clinked it to quiet the murmurs. If Stephanie wanted a spectacle, I would give her one. As the room hushed, I raised my glass, feeling the weight of anticipation and tension. My father's expression morphed from neutral to tense, and I knew I had their attention. Addressing my dad and Stephanie, I began by reflecting on how the most valuable lessons in life often arose from those who dare to challenge us. I spoke of the essence of family, emphasizing that true support should transcend the confines of fitting a predetermined narrative. It struck me that stepping outside their roles would reveal their authentic feelings, and I had long been cast as the outsider in this family saga. Once, I believed that proving myself would alter my father's perception of me, but I had finally come to understand that it was never truly about me. It was about the facade he wished to maintain. I declare that I had cultivated a life free from their expectations, and that independence had brought me more fulfillment than I could have ever imagined. As I spoke, Stephanie attempted to regain control, brushing my comments aside, but I pressed on, asserting that the name tag was merely the latest in a long line of reminders that I would forever be seen as a disappointment in their eyes. The discomfort radiating from my father was palpable, yet I felt empowered, buoyed by the clarity of my convictions. I concluded my toast with a final, heartfelt declaration. To the last time you'll ever see me. The silence that enveloped the room was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had filled it moments before. With each step I took toward the exit, I felt lighter, liberated from the weight of their expectations. The cool night air greeted me like an embrace, a balm for my wounded spirit. In the days that followed, I chose to ignore the calls and messages pouring in from my family. I was acutely aware of their anger and disappointment, likely discussing how I had humiliated my father and Stephanie in front of friends and family. My aunt reached out, but I felt the need to retreat, to take time for myself. When my father called, his tone resonated with familiar disappointment. But I stood firm, reiterating that I would not be returning, and that I refused to pretend to be someone I was not any longer. Weeks slipped by, and the distance between us solidified my resolve. I learned that my family had either aligned themselves with my dad and Stephanie or chosen to remain silent about the rift that had emerged. Whispers reached me about my father's hurt and Stephanie's fury, but none of it affected me. I realized I had made the right choice, and for the first time in years, a sense of peace washed over me, replacing the turmoil that had once consumed my thoughts. Now, I find myself reflecting on whether I crossed a line by walking out, by making that toast, and by severing ties with my family. Did I go too far, or was this moment long overdue? I know I'll never earn my dad's approval, but I have finally understood that I don't need to be the daughter he envisioned. I have come to embrace the truth that it is perfectly acceptable to prioritize my own well-being and happiness over the weight of their expectations.